Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have an exciting show for you tonight. We have two guests. We're starting out with Jack Bushong, and he actually contacted me because he read a blog that Charles Lear wrote about his case in Michigan, which happened in 1994. I don't want to get the dates confused with the other one, which is our guest Ian Rogers. He's going to be in the second half about Canada's crazy UFO. Well, I'll give a spoiler here. It was a hoax, but some people call it the Guardian case, the Guardian VHS video that was sent to someone. Some people call it the Carp, Ontario incident, that. But there's a lot more to it than just what was hoaxed, because there's a lot going on in that particular area, believe it or not. So anyway, we'll be talking to him on the second part of this show. And our blog this week is A Helicopter Crew Encounters a UFO by Charles Lear. And that's about the Captain Coyne helicopter case. Fascinating case. It's one of the ones I've really liked reading about, how the UFO actually lifted the helicopter. That's what they figure happened, because it rose really fast. And anyway, a very scary encounter. So that one is a great blog, and that will be an audio blog. A little late on the last audio blog, but that will be coming along. Just a little bit I want to talk about, and it's kind of a negative thing, but I think I should bring it up. And that is, people have heard me talk about a few different people on this show that I think, should be called out. And one of them is Dr. Stephen Greer, and he's looking for attention right now. So doing so, he is saying that Luis Elizondo is a disinformation agent, and Leslie Kean, and he calls her Leslie Kean, and Chris Mellon and all that, they're all in on it. And Sheenan, the lawyer, I believe. I don't remember that part of it right now. But anyway, he did wonderful work. Dr. Stephen Greer did wonderful work in the beginning. He was the disclosure guy, the first one that was actually talking about disclosure. And I think there may be a little jealousy out there with him, because that's what he's pushing, that they are all disinformation and it's a false disclosure. And, he wants to be the disclosure guy. But anyway, if you're new and just looking into the UFO field, I'm just going to tell you, stay clear of Greer. So there, maybe he can sue me because a lot of people are saying that he's actually looking to get sued by those people just to get back in the news again and relevant. So he can do that to me if he would like to. That's just fine. Anyway, that's a little bit of negativity. I hate starting off like that, but I wanted to just address that, because he doesn't need the limelight to be the Mr. Disclosure guy. These other people that have come along are doing a wonderful job, in my opinion. Anyway, here we go. Our guest was involved on a radar screen. He's got a great background. He's more on the science side, and he was involved in a mysterious case over Lake Michigan in that area. And we are going to bring him in right now. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin.
Yeah. And so, Jack, you actually contacted me, which I thought was very nice. And so I looked up, I remember reading the blog and thinking, wow, you watched what was going on. And can you, for the person that's never heard about this particular case, does it have like a lot of UFO encounters will have like a name, like the Lake Michigan encounter, or does it have any type of name that people call it by, that incident?
Basically, in Michigan, it's called the March 8th, 1994, not tornado, but UFO. I'm used to saying tornado.
UFO, a weather guy.
Right. Yeah, that's what I usually say. But this happened on a very cold year. This was the cold year where Mount Pinatubo erupted the year before. So the Great Lakes largely froze over that year, and including Lake Michigan. I had never seen Lake Michigan freeze over completely all the way over, except there was some area down towards the south, the southern maybe eighth of the lake had open water down there, but otherwise most of the Great Lakes were ice covered except for Lake Ontario maybe. And so it was an unusual winter. Usually in Muskegon, Michigan, we have due to the warm lakes and the cold air going over the warm lakes, we have snow happening all the time. We have clouds happening all the time throughout the winter. But in this case, we had, which is very rare, we have clear skies in the winter with the Lake Michigan frozen all over and very cold conditions. So without the lake effect, so this was a very unusual night and extremely cold, high pressure dome. The radar was working perfectly. There was no super refraction of the radar because there's no inversions. And so I can debunk that, which is a lot of people have been trying to tell me, but the weather conditions were not right for the super refraction or inversions of the radar. And what happened was with the National Weather Service, we're called quite often by law enforcement all the time. And this would be the central dispatcher of Ottawa County, which is the county south of the county Muskegon was in. This is where the Grand Haven and Holland is in Ottawa County. And they had literally dozens of phone calls coming from the entire county, from northeast to southwest in that general line going towards Lake Michigan. Now, what they did is they sent out a police officer to the very first caller, and by the time he got there, the UFO had, or I guess UAP you call it now. The UAP had been. It was at treetop level. And there was some recording you can hear the recordings from them. And you can hear a little child saying, oh my goodness, it's a UFO, and it's a little 4-year-old child saying this. And but anyway, it was, they say it was near treetop level. At that level, I would not have been able to see the object due to the curvature of the earth. So, and any ground clutter that might be in the way. So, by the time that I was called by the sheriff's department, or the sheriff called dispatch, or called radioed back to dispatch. Dispatch tried to call the FAA. They wouldn't answer. This was about 9:00 at night. And so he called me. I was on shift alone. It was a fair weather night, nothing going on in the weather. The radar was doing its usual rotation, as it always does, even though there's no weather out there. And they asked me, well, can you see objects in the sky? We have we have a lot of reports of lights in the sky now treetop level. It's scaring a lot of our citizens. And can you take a look at it? And so knowing that I could actually see airplanes, I could actually see jumbo jets. And on fair weather days, when I was trying to get proficient at weather radar, I would actually try to spot an airplane. And yes, you can see an airplane with a weather radar. That's why I had this graphic right here. If you want to put it up there.
Even though it's backwards,
it is backwards. I'm sorry about that. But as you see in the top left-hand side, we have what FAA radars don't have is we have the capability of determining the type of whether it's a liquid, solid, highly reflective, or basically what it is. And that's what it shows down in the amplitude scale down there. That's basically a measure of the amount of energy coming back. And as you can see there on the left, the airplane shows a certain type of signature. It shows a certain type of signature that's similar to the building on the right-hand side. Rainfall, on the other hand, shows a signature that's much more fuzzy, and the ground, also a mountain or so on, will have a more of a fuzzy appearance. But because this is a high reflective object, it was definitely an airplane. It was moving, not an airplane, but an aircraft. It was moving at, I could detect it moving at a certain speed. It was moving pretty smoothly, about 100 miles an hour. And after about 1 minute of looking at it, and I had already known that I could look at fine jumbo jets on radar. I would actually point the radar down at, I've always been an aviation buff. I've flown on airplanes all the time and throughout my life. And I flew from Fort Lauderdale. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, and I was born in Michigan, so would see my dad in Michigan every summer and winter. So I was always flying back and forth my entire life. So I knew Chicago O'Hare Airport pretty well, and I knew by pointing the radar over at Chicago O'Hare, I would always see jumbo jets flying and taking off, and I could follow them, no problem. And this actually had the same signature as like what a jumbo jet would have. It was well off the ground. It was about 15,000 feet when I first saw it in altitude, and then it after watching it move slowly, it started doing some crazy things. It split up into three, and I and when I looked at the radar at that point, I have the ability to, unlike an FAA radar, my radar, the radar beam goes out in a cone shape, a round cone shape. And it's generally up at a 0.5 degree level going around. And, you know, the weather radars go around pretty slowly. But it's only to look at the bottom part of the atmosphere, usually. Not, it's different with the Doppler radar now today. But back then, we were only interested in how much rainfall was falling at the bottom part of the atmosphere. So I did have the ability to crank the radar in the vertical position and also take it off automatic rotation and wave the radar back and forth so that I could reflect whatever was in the sky there. And I would wave it back and forth, the radar beam back and forth, up and down, because the radar beam would be cone shaped and would get larger as you go far away from the radar. And at about that distance, the radar beam would be about half a mile. And so anything within that half mile would bleed together because of the resolution at that point. But the most energy would be down the center line, and then we consider the beam width as being from the amount of energy at the center to where the half point is of the energy at the side. So at the side, you know, and we would consider that the cone of our radar. And so what it was telling me was the radar signature was that it was a solid object. It was a highly reflective solid object. It was just like an airliner. Now, the problem was that as soon as I started looking at it, within a few, I don't know, about 15 seconds to a minute of looking at it, immediately I saw it split up into three, and it split up into three in a vertical triangle. It's really hard to explain, but it was there were about, say, 50 miles from the radar, there was one object that was stacked on top of another. One was about 80,000 feet in the air. The other one was down at about 15,000 feet in the air. And then there was a third one that was closer to the radar, but it was making a triangular formation on my vertical scope, the kind where I can see the slice of the cloud or the thunderstorm in the vertical way. And in order, that's really very, it's an extreme coincidence, because in order for that to happen, the objects would have to be directly down the radial of the radar. And it was almost as if it was pointing an arrow directly back at my radar. It really confused me. And that's when, on the 9/11 tape, I said, oh my God, what is this? Because it was literally, I saw the two objects stacked on top of each other. I saw the third object directly pointing toward the radar, almost looking like the tip of an arrow pointing directly at the radar. So that confused me. But at the very same time, the police officer saw the same thing. And in fact, there was another verification of it, where there was a report from somebody on Lake Michigan who saw it. He lived on Lake Michigan, and he said that he saw what looked like stacked UFOs one on top of each other at one point. And so that matches pretty much what I saw for a brief moment. Now, those other, now in triangular formation in the vertical, it finally flipped and went horizontal. It was they were all at about the same altitude, at about 15,000 feet. And then they kept making a triangular formation. So the closest return would actually move first, and it began to move more of a westerly direction towards Lake Michigan. First, it got to the shoreline of Lake Michigan, and then they became a triangular formation that went over a couple. Two of them were on the shoreline, and the other one was inland a little bit, but making an equidistant triangle of about 20 miles apart from each other. And it was instantaneous. And now, though the radar that I was sweeping back and forth, if you can imagine, the further away from the radar you get, the beam is going to be going faster and faster, waving back and forth. Close by the radar, the beam is going by maybe, I don't know, as I was cranking it back and forth like that, maybe at about 100 miles an hour close to the radar. But if you go way out to where the radar beam is being swept, I was sweeping from, say, South Bend, Indiana to Chicago within about a half a second each. So that's thousands of miles an hour. So they were actually able to jump, within that 20 miles within that short amount of period. And but the people on the ground actually did say they didn't just disappear and then show up. They actually went from a hover to an extreme acceleration, and then would deaccelerate and go to another hover 20 miles away. And they kept doing this for as long. See, I was on their phone call with Ottawa County Sheriffs for about 45 minutes, describing the movements. And they did it. These objects did it several times. Where the main one, it seemed like, or the closest one to the radar, would move first. The other two would follow, and go into another triangular formation again. And then there was a fourth one that I saw that kind of would come into play every once in a while, but I couldn't really find it or keep track of it. I was already really looking at those three that I could see the best. And but they instead of moving from, say, and this is my map of Michigan, if I do it the right way, where, okay, do I have the Detroit? Okay, Detroit over here by my thumb, and then Muskegon is over here, right in through here. Well, they went from the top. There was sightings in a row from Houghton Lake down towards the southwest towards Holland, Michigan, right down here. But then as soon as I started looking at them, they went out to the middle of, middle of Lake Michigan. And so they went to the middle of Lake Michigan, due west of, say, Grand Haven right there. Holland, Michigan right there. And which would be between the letters where you see Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo. Would be in between those letters. And so they were in the middle of Lake Michigan right there, smack dab in the middle. Lake Michigan at that point is about 80 miles across. So they were 40 miles from Milwaukee and 40 miles from the Lake Michigan shoreline in Michigan. Now, from there, they kept doing the same thing, only this time the main northernmost point would go to the south, and the other two would follow, again, making triangular formation every time it did it. Now, once the objects moved out of the county and into the middle of Lake Michigan, the sheriff could not see the objects anymore. He actually was chasing them with a squad car and towards the west, and he couldn't keep up with them, of course. And but of course, I could see it on radar and see everything they were doing. And I saw them we got off the phone after 45 minutes with Ottawa County. Once they were away from Ottawa County, it seemed like Central Dispatch was not concerned about it anymore. They were out of his airspace. He didn't care anymore. Yeah. But it was, I had regular duties. I had to do service observations, get something on the weather radio. But every time I came back, I would see these objects, and I watched them for 2 hours. In fact, I watched them until I left the office at midnight. Did
you tell the person following you?
Yes, I did. I did. He had no explanation. I was a little embarrassed about what went on. I had no idea. It didn't even cross my mind that I was being recorded. And so I did make a short note that I was called by Ottawa County Sheriff to look at something on radar. I saw something and it was moving quite fast. And I just threw out a number saying a mile a second, something like that. I just didn't know. I just had no idea. It was more like, 20 miles in a split second. But, I couldn't really estimate. It was extraordinarily fast. So.
And also, did it stop fast too?
Yes, right away. Just stopped on a dime. And so, I was thinking, good grief, if there's any people in there, they're going to be a pancake. But from the inertia effect,
for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that once, I was pretty relaxed at the first part of the call, but once once it started doing these crazy things, I began to get a little nervous about it, and it creeped me out a little bit. But I also wondered if, because it acted so crazy, after I started looking at it with radar, it was almost as if, that these things were knowing I was looking at it. And I was expecting, I was visualizing the radar getting zapped with some, ultra high energy beam, and, my radar console, just going up into flames, and so I was thinking about that. I literally was thinking about that they could easily have whatever it was. I mean, this was during the Gulf War too, or right after, and I know that basically I had a radar lock on these objects. I know that the military could look at see radars that were locked on their aircraft, and they would blow them up, these radar sites. So obviously, whether military or not, I knew that they were looking at me. Now, the thing is they made no, whatever these things were, they made no attempt to hide themselves. They were like saying, "Hey, we're here. Look at us," and that's what it seemed like that whole time, both on radar and by the people that were seeing it on the ground. But the unusual thing was that the way they were moving, it seemed like they had a direction in mind of which way they were heading. They took their own sweet time about getting there, and kind of looking around. It seemed like they were obviously intelligently controlled, and they were basically looking around, and but they had a general direction in mind, which is southwest, even though they zigzagged a bit, on the way down there. Now, when I saw them, they went straight due west out to the middle of Lake Michigan, then straight south. And once they got down to the lower part of Lake Michigan, where the only open water in the Great Lakes happened to be, and this would be northeast of Chicago, they were in the middle, and they were clustered together, and there were literally dozens of them. And so not just the 3 and 4, there were dozens of them. I don't know where they all came from, but they
Wow.
looked like it was crazy. They most of them were hovering in place, and every once in a while, and actually there were a couple that were weaving around the other ones that were stationary. I could see that. But the fact that they were right over open water, they were at about 10,000 feet or so. There were probably some that were lower than that, but I couldn't see that because it was at the, even though the radar was literally 3 miles from from Lake Michigan, I would not be able to see, due to the trees, that too low down at that latitude. But I gotta look it back up and see what the lowest I would be able to see at that level would be. But one thing I did notice is that they did not, for instance, an airliner would, of course, stay at a certain altitude above the earth, the ground. These things went in straight lines. It didn't care if it was the earth was curving out from underneath it or not. They went in a straight line. So when I saw it at one place, when it jumped to the other place further south, where the earth was kind of falling off, underneath it, they were at an increased altitude, meaning they went in a straight line, regardless of the curvature of the earth. So
it had nothing to do with gravity, it seems like. Almost
had nothing to do with the curvature of the earth. No, they said they wanted to go in a straight line. They did, so and yeah, it is. And but I actually watched these things for about 2 hours, and they were there. And I just can't think of, of course, a lot of people said, "Oh, it's got to be military," but honestly, why would military be out in the middle of Lake Michigan for 2 hours hovering there, And
yeah, that's always one of the questions, that you definitely would have to ask. Another one is, why would they do that and not, alert people that they were doing this exercise, if they were. And one question I had for you, do you get to see actually transponders or not when you're
No,
with, no.
no,
So you have,
and
and another thing, I'm pulling this up. Does your weather radar screen look something like this?
it was well, yeah, it was similar to that. Now that looks more of a digital way. Now you have to remember our radar was the way the Doppler radars work now, or we call the WSR 88D next rad radar. My radar dish was about 6 feet in width. The ones now today are 30 feet, 35 feet in width. But what they do to get a three-dimensional picture of the atmosphere is they go around once at about a half a degree, which is the normal. What we used to do with a 74C radar was go around at a half a degree above altitude. Believe it or not, just a half a degree altitude is enough to where, you get over to Chicago, as far as Chicago, and you're a couple thousand feet off the ground.
Is that right? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Now, there is a little bit of subrefraction. There is a little bit of refraction around the beam. The radar beam does go around the curvature of the Earth. It's just like looking at a sunset. Where you see the sunset is you're not really looking directly at the sun in a direct line. The sun is actually below the horizon. It just doesn't look like it. It looks like it's above and that's just refraction. That's all it is. So the radar beam acts the same way. Now, at different weather conditions, it will either super refract and you get anomalous propagation, or basically you would start seeing a lot of ground clutter, and ground clutter looks like it would look like heavy rain on the ground everywhere, and it would usually be very close to the radar. But a lot of people tried to explain that it was anomalous propagation, but you don't see anomalous propagation looking like dots. You don't look, they have the fuzz, as I said in the graphic. They don't. These were high reflective, and they were pegging the top of the amplitude chart, meaning that a lot of energy was coming right back. The way the radar works is a few thousand pulses go out every second, and they're short pulses where the radar is actually listening more than they're sending out an EM radiation to listen. So it's pulses going out very fast, but they're listening for the echo to come back at light speed. So it's a light speed thing going, and so. But
the sweeping, how long does it take? How are you able to determine speeds and all that? Because how long does a sweep take?
Well, I took it off the automatic mode.
I see.
Yeah, with the radars back then, we had to, if we wanted to look at one thunderstorm, we would see if there was hail in there, see if there was any possible tornado or something like that. We had to take it off automatic rotation mode, and we would point it at a thunderstorm, and we would use another crank. We had two cranks, one to actually be able to go wave the radar in the horizontal back and forth, and another one to crank the radar both up and down in a vertical spot. So it's like, if you can imagine, unlike a FAA radar where they do the entire atmosphere in one sweep, we're just a little cone at that period. So whereas they're using like a big floodlight that is like, 90 degrees wide and going around, they really can't see the altitude of objects without a transponder. Now, we could. Our radar beam was more direct. It was more. It was narrower, and at that time, we only cared at how much rain was falling at the ground level, and so. But we had to look for hail up at the top of the thunderheads to whether to or not to issue severe thunderstorm warnings for that, and so. so we had the ability to have to read the signatures of the radar to know what we're looking at. How heavy is the rain? Shows one signature. Whether there's hail shows another signature. Whether it's anomalous propagation or ground clutter has another signature on that amplitude chart. And if you're looking at an airplane, it has a different signature. And so these had the signature of an aircraft, and not a an aircraft that has any kind of ability to be invisible to radar. It didn't have stealth capability. I mean, they were about as reflective as can be. I mean, literally, they were flying tin cans. That's all I could say.
Yeah. How many witnesses do you think there were overall? And was there any other radar information, FAA or anything? Did you ever find out if there was any other information of people recording this?
I actually did. We had a hotline. We were at the Muskegon County Airport, and I had a hotline to the. You just pick up the phone, and immediately I go to the tower. And so the FAA, we were U.S. government personnel. They were federal employees as well, of course. And so so we worked together really well. And so I called them, told them what happened. And I said, we're getting a lot of phone calls about, or Ottawa County is getting a lot of phone calls about lights in the sky. And I could actually see it on my radar. Did you see anything to the south of you? And the FAA air traffic controller at that point said, well, he said, yeah, I saw 3 aircraft in formation, but for some reason I couldn't see it on my radar, which means they had no transponder on it.
Oh, I see.
And so that was it. I had to. There was a scientist from West Michigan University. It was a paranormal scientist. He came up and he wanted to interview us. And I had to borrow an overhead projector. It's the 90s. We didn't have the internet and all that yet.
Was that Mike Walsh?
That was the reporter.
I see.
His name was Dr. Swords. And,
Swords, yes.
Swords, yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Swords. And so he came up and I gave him a presentation with my boss's graces. And I gave a presentation with my boss and Dr. Swords. And so anyway, when I went over to get the overhead projector, I had to borrow one from the FAA control tower. They had one in their storeroom. So, but as I was going up the elevator in the FAA control room, or FAA control elevator, I told I'm young. I was excited about what I saw. I asked the FAA person in the elevator. I said, I'm the one that was the UFO radar operator. And I said, what do you think? And he looked at me dead in the eye, and was completely expressionless and said, I can't talk about it. And it was kind of ominous. And, and I found out later when I was, I worked at the FAA for not as an employee of the FAA, but as the National Weather Service employee. The FAA does air traffic controllers at the FAA do employ weather service meteorologists, and I worked at one for about 30 days. And before my boss, when I first couple of days, get in the building, and there's another. First, you got to get in the gate, and then you got to get into the building, and then there's a room in the center, and you can't get in there without the proper key card identification. And before he opened the door, he said, "Whatever you see and whatever you hear, you cannot mention outside this office and outside this room." And so never have, never will. But I did joke. I said, you mean like what? You see UFOs or something? And he just kind of Shrug, like, well, so.
Wow.
And so then he opened the door, and I can't say anything else about it. So, or I'll get in trouble. So yeah.
Well,
But that's the way they are.
yeah, I know I think of the O'Hare case. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Gate C-17, 2006, I think it was, where that UFO was right over the tarmac and then shot up and left a hole in the clouds.
Oh, yeah.
And FAA, they cannot, there's no word that comes out of the FAA when it comes to these things.
No. And even the guy said, I remember him saying specifically, even if I did see it, I wouldn't say anything about it. And that is a true statement. They won't.
I wonder why. Because there may be things in the sky that they have no control of, and could be a safety issue.
It's a possibility. I have no idea. Nothing was ever explained to me. And that's the truth. But I don't know. I didn't. The thing about being a scientist is I really did not want anybody to know about this. I was initially excited about it, but once I saw the reactions from other scientists in the agency, I was like, no, I'm not going to say anything anymore about this.
How do you feel now?
Well, I feel vindicated. All these Navy people are coming out and saying, yeah, we're seeing them every day we go out and fly. And the thing is the radar operators, and although they haven't interviewed any radar operators that I've seen yet in the Navy, but the reports coming out are exactly the same as what I was saying 30 years ago about what these things were doing.
Yeah.
And so I do feel vindicated about this, because it was a bit of, I felt like I was losing credibility if I talked about this. And as a scientist, you do not want to lose credibility.
Sure.
And and even with people, and even today, I mentioned I was doing this podcast and a program, and there's people that make jokes, but and I don't mind jokes, but in the Weather Service, they weren't joking around. They just, they're scientists. They just look at you like you're, I don't want to talk about it.
All right. So that there's a couple of questions that came in, but I'd like to ask them for these people here. But that baffles me, just because wouldn't you want to have an answer? You see something like that.
Yeah,
wouldn't
absolutely.
Any scientist want to have an answer with what you experienced?
Absolutely. And I don't think that I haven't been thinking about this for 30 years. And I have in my own time. Now my family has heard all about it, but and actually I have a son that's going to Georgia Tech and he's a physics major, and he wants to be an aerospace engineer. And so he says, do not put my name out there with this, because I want to get a job, so he
Wow.
does not want to be anywhere near this. He's actually skeptical. And I say, well, then what do you think I saw? And he knows I'm telling the truth. I've been talking about it to the family for 30 years. But I would not talk about it. I thought about it so much, it gave me headaches. I would pour through the radar manuals and pour through other stories that were coming out. I tried to, a lot of people would say, well, it's the military aircraft are sending out false signals, radar jamming, but it doesn't match up then, which I almost bought, except it doesn't match up with the police officer's observations himself and the other people the other citizens of the county speaking up. So,
Right.
and you have to remember the National Weather Service is an agency that has constant communication with the media. So we're not privy to anything top secret. The only thing that's top secret with us would be a coworker's social security number, and that's it. I mean, we put out all our data out on the internet. All the raw data goes out. When I did my shows, the only thing the Weather Service was concerned about was that the Weather Service did not want to become the UFO reporting center, and I
Right.
can understand that. I really
Mhm.
can, because we did have a few drunk guys that would see the planet Venus and, say it's moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
When they're moving. We have a question up there. Was each target jumbo jet size, in your opinion?
yeah, they were. They had about, you have to realize too, is that the further away from the radar, the larger the beam goes, the cone goes wider and wider. So they take up less of a space of the cone. So the one that was closest to the radar looked bigger because it took out more of the cone, but the ones further away took up less of the cone. So they looked smaller, but most likely they were the same size, because when they did move further and further away from the radar, they did seem to have that same getting smaller and smaller look to it. And even the jumbo jets that I would look at and spot at O'Hare Airport would be pretty small. They would be pretty weak signals, and they would be pretty small. But this would be the first time that I saw something as large as a jumbo jet so close to the radar, because there's just not many jet airliners in that area of the country at 15 to 30,000 feet that are going over our airspace. Grand Rapids, Michigan is the big airport there, and they just don't have jets that take off, but maybe once in every half hour back then. So I knew with the constant flow of airplanes going in and out of O'Hare that I'd be able to see something, and I did. I could pick up the bigger airlines.
Yeah.
So
Did the National UFO Reporting Center look into this? Do you know if anyone, if they got involved? Peter
yeah,
Davenport.
yeah, they did. I actually, there was a number. I didn't know it was on our phone list on our computer, and it said MUFON, and actually it said National UFO Reporting Center.
Yeah,
And
Newfort.
so I thought it was part of my job to actually call them when I saw something. So I did, left a message, and in reality, it was really for us meteorologists to tell people that call in with UFO reports to say, call this number.
So
Not
did you get in
for me.
trouble for that? Did you get in
No,
trouble?
not at all. They knew. They said this number. The reason why Jack called them is because it's on our computer saying National UFO Reporting Center. So I was
Trying to do.
following what I thought was proper procedure.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, at that point, I was the only Weather Service employee to ever see and report a UFO on radar before.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of weird anomalies on radars now, but the kind of objects that I could see with today's radar, with it being digital, and with the way they operate now, they're automatic. You can't take them off automatic mode. You can't
Oh, really?
manipulate the radar. Yeah, no,
Wow.
it does. It'll go around once at a half a degree. It'll go up a half a degree, go around again, go up a half a degree, go around again, go up. And so they get a 3-dimensional picture of the atmosphere that way. And so they're always on the move, and then by the time they get way up to the top at their top angle, they just come right back down. They start all over again, going around. Now we're getting, supposedly phased array radar is coming, where we'll be able to do the entire atmosphere in one shot, and hopefully that'll be soon. So our users don't have to wait a few minutes to see the most updated radar.
Now, what was the aftermath like for you? Like to say, like immediately after, and then after, and then until you retired.
I was scared. It didn't even occur to me that it was being recorded. I don't know why. I just didn't think about it. And so evidently what happened was there were some people that were on police band radios. They heard it. And so they immediately went down to the 911 center, and through the Freedom of Information Act, they got a copy of the cassette with some of the many of the people that called in the UFO reports, the citizens, and then my entire phone call was on that tape. And so sure, I lost my cool a little bit when I said, "Oh my God, what is this?" But the police officer was excited as well. Otherwise, it would have been, I was less excited about tornadoes than I was. Of course, I'm more focused on tornadoes than UFOs or anything like that. But I was more creeped out about this, and then when you get into severe thunderstorm and tornado mode, you've already practiced enough. You know exactly what to do. But this was just a wrong place at the wrong time kind of thing, and it just so happened to happen to me. I moved. I was considered a graduate intern at that point. I was supposed to be a GS 579 and then out as a 11, 12 to get a journeyman forecaster job. But we were undergoing modernization and restructuring, so there was a delay in that program, and so I was stuck there, as well as thousands of other meteorologists, waiting for the modernization to complete. So we were all kind of jammed, waiting for us. We were considered graduate interns waiting to get our finalists or our next assignment, which would mean that we were forecasters at that point. And they actually did shut the Muskegon County, the Muskegon Muskegon Radar and the Muskegon National Weather Office and Grand Rapids Weather Office took over our responsibilities. But they went from 400 to about 150 offices in those early 90s decade. And so, I, at that point, I was excited about it. I was nervous about it. And I just so happened to be taking a trip the next week. It was March, so it was cold. And I was looking forward to going back to Florida to see my mother and with my wife. And so, it was a little ominous when I left, and I was gone for a few weeks, but everybody was calling, asking, what was going on. But when I would talk to the people, generally I would get that look, and I'm sure you know what that look is, where, and it was about 50%, I would say at that point. 50% would look at you like, you're nuts, and the other 50% were pretty well interested. They were like, "Oh, tell me all about it,"
Yeah,
And
I find that's true. I hate to say this, but we ran out of time. I can't believe it went so
sure.
fast. And I remember mentioning to can you want to be on for 2 hours? I should have had you on for 2 hours. But anyway,
okay.
You've been great. I really enjoyed it a lot. It's an amazing story, and I'm glad that you are talking about it, and you feel more comfortable to talk about it.
Thanks
so much, Jack.
Sure.
All right,
No
you
problem.
take care.
Thank
Bye. All right, so now I recorded a clip with my friend Dave Marler, and I'm going to play that for the break. So hang in there over at KGRA Radio. We'll be right back right after these messages. Hey, David, thanks so much for joining us for this little break in the show that we have on a weekly basis. I appreciate it. So you have some guests there in your little, what do I want to call it? Your archives? Is that what you would call it? The UFO archives?
Archives. I think really any of those titles really fit the bill. I mean, we're doing a lot of historical research this weekend and have some visiting researchers, as you mentioned. And just real quick, I can kind of show you what they're doing here.
Yeah.
So
go the flip around.
Oh.
Hey, everyone.
And of course,
there's Charles Lear. That's our the blogger for Podcast UFO and audio blogger that you hear each week here on YouTube. And we have Barry from Barry. I'm sorry.
Barry Roth from Colorado.
Welcome to the show. Have you ever heard of our show before? You could say no if you haven't.
I have. No, I've heard of your show before.
That's good. That was a true test right there. So let's take a walk around. Look at those beautiful. Wait a minute. I want to go back to the bookcases just because I know those are lawyer bookcases, the stack ones.
Yes.
Did those come out of one place? They must have.
I've had to acquire those over a period of years as I continue to grow the library. And then, of course, we got the very end there. We have floor to ceiling bookcases.
Yeah, those come in the stacks. You can take the stacks down or build them up. Yeah,
absolutely. And over here, though, real quick, we have the studio area where I do my podcasts with various shows. But also we're doing digitization work. And you can see the reel to reel there. Working on the historic nightcap audio recordings, and that's one I'm getting ready to do a interview with a 1966 eyewitness. So lots of digitization work. We're going to have another one where we'll have 2 workstations set up to digitize video as well as audio. And then over here we have Project Blue Book memorabilia. I don't think I have time to get into all that, but you can kind of see some of the original materials from Project Blue Book that I've gathered over the years. In addition, I might add to the files of Dr. J. Allen Hynek. But we also have original front page historic newspapers. That's from Farmington. You can see many of the others, photographs and publications, just walking down the aisle here. And then as we work our way this direction, we have more bookcases. We like to call this side the library room for obvious reasons. And then as we work our way over this direction, this is what we call the files. And here we have microfilm.
The X-Files?
This is the real X-Files, Martin.
Yeah, okay.
This is fact, not fiction. And here you can see Charles. He's actually going through some material right now.
Actual Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book photographs right there from the original
goodness.
Project Blue Book materials from Lieutenant Carmen Morano. And so he's going through that. And then over here, we have some of the historic nightcap CUFOS case files. And so you can see we have quite a few file cabinets down this entire stretch, even getting around Charles there, and lots of historical material that I've been able to gather over the years. And these drawers are filled with tons of material, and as I mentioned earlier, including microfilm.
Amazing.
Just reels and reels of microfilm, each comprising hundreds of pages of government documents as well as news clippings on the subject matter.
Wow. This is fascinating. We're out of time, though, David. But hey, thanks so much for showing us the bird's eye or drone's eye view here.
Happy to. Thank you, Martin.
All right. Take care.
In 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. This is Martin Willis, and my guest now is Ian Rogers up in Canada. We're going to be talking about a really very As I said before, spoiler alert, it's a hoax, but it's an amazing situation, and it caused a big stir in its day. And welcome to the show, Ian.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on. And I watched the UFO Town because I was lucky enough to get the screener, and I didn't realize that in the States you can't actually watch that yet, but you may be able to at some point, right?
Yeah, it was produced for CBC, Canadian television, but they're in the process of selling it to other territories right now, including the United States. So hopefully you'll be able to see it very soon.
Yeah. But I was able to watch it. Now, I guess the takeaway from that is there's still a lot going on around and there was in the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting case. I mean, obviously that's why the people that made UFO Town decided to do a documentary about it. On the surface, you've got this the Guardian case itself, which has been featured on Unsolved Mysteries, etc. But it's based on an existing series of UFO sightings in that area, in the West Carleton area, from the late 1980s to the early 1990s. Sorry about my cat.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it was a whole bunch of sightings. What sort of gave a lot of credibility to the Guardian case initially was before the figure who called himself Guardian was sending out material. There was already reports in the local newspapers of UFO sightings independent of Guardian. Even reports of strange beings being seen in people's backyards. So there was a precedent for it before Guardian even started sending out material.
Oh, how about that? I'm looking in your background at your books. Oh my God, how many books do you have? And I'm in the process of moving, and I can't stand moving.
There's easily a couple thousand. There's also more shelves over there and shelves. I'm a writer, so I mean,
wow.
That I'm kind of surrounded by books. I call it my fallout shelter down here because I could survive, nuclear blast, minus of course, but lots to read.
Yeah. How about that? So let's talk about the. I don't know. Do you call it the? I saw it called the Carp Ontario case or something like that. Also, the Guardian, the Guardian VHS. What is the proper name for that?
You know what? I've just heard it referred to as the Carp case or the Carp Guardian case. I mean, once you say Carp and Guardian, people usually know what you're talking about. It's a pretty infamous case because even beyond ufology, it was featured on the Unsolved Mysteries program back in the early 90s, which was obviously a very, very popular TV show. It's one of my favorites. Yeah. I think it still holds up. All the old episodes are available on YouTube right now. And my wife and I have actually been going back and rewatching them. And I'm having a lot of nostalgic feelings of when my sister and I used to watch them and how creeped out we used to be by the even just the theme music. And as kids, not even really being aware of the presence of Robert Stack dressed up in his sort of Elliot Ness Untouchables outfit. I wasn't really aware that he was sort of vamping on that at the time. But of course, now older, I've got a new appreciation for it. And Guardian obviously stuck out to me because I was always interested in UFOs. But the cases in Canada, there weren't a lot of really notable ones. So Guardian really struck a tone with me because it was a case that was not just taking place a couple of hours from where I live, but it was so unusual. I mean, this figure sending out videotapes of alleged UFO landings. Yeah,
I'm gonna put this up on the screen for those of you on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. You can watch it. And anyway, here it is. It goes right here, but we can talk about. So a lot of people may not know exactly what we're talking about, but when they see this video, they'll say, "Oh yeah."
Oh yeah,
because when I first started looking into this, topic in general, I was mesmerized by this one, and ends up being nothing exciting.
Yeah, but it's a spooky tape. I mean, like I said, the context of watching this on Unsolved Mysteries, and you're thinking that this unknown figure recorded this in someone's farmer's field, and then was sending them out sort of anonymously. It's kind of a spooky circumstance. And I've said this to death, but I mean, it really is. The whole case is like a movie. You've got this mysterious figure, like whether or not he's a total nut job or a government insider, you don't really know, right? I mean, you don't know anything about him except his his sort of nom de plume guardian, and he put his thumbprint on his videotapes, and he would send these out with a bunch of material.
Thumbprint, really?
Government documents and photographs and stuff, and they weren't great. That was the reason why UFO investigators, even before the Unsolved Mysteries coverage, didn't really take Guardian very seriously. Even as far as forgeries go, the so-called Department of National Defense documents that he included with the videotape were really poor quality. It was more like what someone thought government documents looked like from like an episode of the X-Files. You know, it didn't even look like there was a lot of effort when there were spelling mistakes in them. Countries that are mentioned in the documents are spelled wrong. So it's so again, it's hard to believe that people actually believed it, and then some people still believe it to this day, you know. But as I always say, there's people that still think the Blair Witch Project is a real movie about 3 kids who got lost in the woods, you know. So people, it's a compelling story, and anytime you've got a mystery, with a supposed answer, you're always going to have a segment of the public who thinks, well, that's deceptive, you know, like that's actually not the truth. That's what they want us to believe, right? So you sort of you go down that rabbit hole of conspiracies where even when you get answers, you don't always trust those answers. You know, it's like this government report. I think it's the Navy report that's supposed to be coming out next month that everyone's all really excited about. They think it's going to be this big disclosure, but I'm interested to see it, but I'm not really holding out much hope about what it's going to be, because this has sort of been the carrot that they've been dangling in front of UFO investigators and people, you know, UFO believers and everyone for years, you know. Like it goes all the way back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when people felt that this was, you know, the government's way by way of Hollywood to indoctrinate the public and prepare them for the big news that aliens are real and they're here. They've said this over the years that, oh, the big disclosure's coming. It's coming any day now. So like, again, I'm curious to see what happens next month with this report, but I'm not really holding out much hope that it's going to be, yep, aliens are real. They've been visiting for a while.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And it may be delayed anyway. I mean, a lot of people are thinking that they may need more time. Yeah, but still, no, I get that. So, can you, like, for the person that's never heard about this, kind of explain from the beginning? Did someone receive this tape in the mail or something like that? I'll try and break it down for you pretty quick. It's what happened was in 1989, this figure named Guardian started sending out kind of like a report, I guess you would say. It was a 2-page report that was talking about a UFO retrieval in the West Carleton area of Ontario, which is near Ottawa. It's about 30 minutes west of Ottawa. So accompanying this report was a photocopy of a image that's supposed to be an alien, I guess, like sort of like a gray style alien, except it's almost like from like a side view where you can almost see what very clearly looks like the strap of a mask. But you almost wonder why he would send that picture and not like a front on shot, because it just wasn't very convincing as far as evidence goes. And even the report, there was no way to really corroborate it. They did send up, it was either MUFON Ontario or QFORN, I can't remember, sent up an investigator just sort of to check it out and see if there was anything to it, because it was talking about a large military presence to retrieve this craft from the swamps of this rural area. There would have been evidence of that activity. It's not a highly populated area, but there are people that live up there. So the investigator spoke to a few people, and no one, except for I think 1 or 2 people, claimed that they saw anything except for like a bright light, but certainly no military presence, much less the kind of presence that would be required to extricate a craft from the swamp. So people, the government or the UFO investigators at the time sort of just dismissed it and moved on. Then in 1991, early 1992, Guardian came back with more material, and this time there was a videotape, and it's the tape that you just showed there. So again, there wasn't really a lot of precedence to sort of take Guardian seriously, but because there was more material, and now there was like a map of the area that he included and this videotape, and because he had sent it a lot more broadly, investigators, I wouldn't even say they took it seriously, but they decided to send a larger team of people up there from MUFON Ontario, people like Drew Williamson and Tom Theophanis, Errol Bruce Knapp. They all went up there with an American investigator named Bob Exler, who also had received a copy of the tape in his home in Maryland. So this was sort of like a joint U.S.-American team that went up to this area.
And part of the case was obviously trying to figure out who Guardian was. You know, there was no indication that he wanted to have any contact. Obviously, he's using a fake name. There's no return address on the packages. So it was Bob Exler's idea to use his media contacts to do a segment on Unsolved Mysteries to try to get Guardian exposed, more or less, because Unsolved Mysteries has got like a tip line. It was kind of like the precursor to America's Most Wanted, right? There was obviously a criminal component to Unsolved Mysteries. It wasn't just ghosts and monsters. There was this hotline, and someone did call in claiming that they knew who Guardian was, that there was a local who was big into UFOs, and he'd actually used the name Guardian in the past. The investigators at that time tried to get this person to speak to them, and he just didn't want to have anything to do with them. Like, he wouldn't even deny that he was Guardian. He just wouldn't speak to them at all, which of course only makes him seem much more suspicious, of course. It was just such an unusual case. I mean, you've got this cast of characters, you've got major television coverage, other TV shows covered it as well, like Sightings and Encounters. If you remember those TV shows on Fox back in the 90s, it was a big time for UFOs, right? I mean, I would even say the 90s was kind of like the second renaissance of UFOs between X-Files and Independence Day and the alien autopsy tape and the 50th anniversary of the Roswell incident. I mean, UFOs were really prominent in the pop culture. But after I guess you would call him the Guardian suspect, refused to really have anything to do with the investigators, and no more material was forthcoming from Guardian, the investigation more or less hit a standstill. There was really nothing that anyone could do with this. You know, Bob tried to find more people to corroborate his encounter, and the Canadian investigators really felt like he was trying to create a narrative out of it. They didn't like his investigative methods. They didn't like the way that he was trying to sort of mold other people's sightings or experiences and connect them to the Guardian case, even though they didn't. One of the people in the UFO Town documentary, she was on, I think, the Encounters program, came right out and said that, you know, she had this encounter. She saw something in the air at that time, but she didn't have anything to do with the Guardian case. She wasn't in that area. It wasn't during that time when Guardian made that tape. But on the show, they spun it like it did, you know, in the way in these shows sometimes do. So there was a lot of animosity between the Canadians and Bob Exler, who they felt was really trying to sort of monetize this case. He really wanted to write the book and sell the book, and whenever there was media coverage, he wanted to be the one by himself on these programs. It's just it sort of muddied the waters of the case. You know, it's sort of if there was a legitimate phenomenon there between Exler's sort of questionable investigative methods and sort of the bad blood between both groups of investigators, it kind of just ruined any real chance to explore what could have been a legitimate phenomenon taking place in West Carleton in the late 80s, early 90s.
So how did this actually get broken down into, like, figuring out what it was?
Well, the funny thing is that it's actually not mentioned in the UFO Town documentary, because again, it's a 45-minute documentary, and there's so many disparate threads that you sort of have to focus on one and not get into all these various tangents, even though they all tell the whole story. But the RCMP was actually involved in the case at one point. One of the witnesses who was working with Bob Exler had talked to them about low-flying helicopters in the area, because the RCMP does not investigate UFOs. So their way, Exler's way of trying to bring them into the investigation, and a way of sort of making it seem legitimate, it was a way for him to sort of look at me, I'm working with the government on this, was to have them investigate the helicopter component, because helicopters are not allowed to fly below a certain, I think it's like 500 feet. So there was an RCMP investigation into this. They sent out an investigator, and because the low-flying helicopters, which were seen sometimes in conjunction with the UFO sightings, was tied into the case so much, this constable almost inadvertently kind of had to investigate the UFO case as well. And he became convinced, after speaking to a lot of experts who looked at the tape, there was a lot. I mean, it's on a flight path. There's a military base out there. He became convinced that it was a night exercises, that it's a helicopter on the tape with flares that they use for night exercises. The only problem with that is the types of flares that they use are not like the red burning flares. These are just like simple road flares. The flares that they use in the night exercises are actually infrared flares that only show up when they're using infrared night vision goggles, which is the point of the night exercises. They try to hover as close to the ground without landing in some of these exercises. It's the purpose of those kinds of that type of training. There was a lot more support towards the idea that the people who claimed to have had the UFO landing on their property were involved in a hoax. There was, if you look at some frames of the videotape, and it's hard. I mean, it's not a first generation videotape. This is a video from, like, again, from the early 90s. This is long before HD, the quality that we get on our phones. But there are a lot of shots where it looks just like a truck, basically, like a pickup truck at an angle. It's also worth noting that one of the UFO investigators, Tom Theophanis, ran a windshield repair company for a time. So this was a guy who knows what windshields look like, and he was able to pretty much identify it to a type of truck that was owned by one of the people who was suspected of hoaxing this thing. So again, it's, I mean, I don't want to say that it was definite. I mean, short of having signed confessions from the hoaxers, which you're never going to get. I mean, in the minds of the people that were very seriously investigated, myself included, we're all pretty convinced that it was a hoax. We're pretty sure we know who did it. I mean, I don't want to name them because, I mean, it's a privacy thing. Nothing comes from naming these people. But the fact that nothing else really came from that time, and Guardian was never heard from again, sort of says to me that there wasn't really anything there, at least in terms of what Guardian was reporting. I just think it's really too bad because it definitely seemed like, as you see in the UFO Town documentary, people were seeing stuff in that area. There were a lot of sightings, many sightings, independent of Guardian, and what you would call a wave, a UFO wave from, I would say, 88 to 93, 94. I wish that more attention had been focused on that. And rather than trying to chase this Guardian suspect around, even though I can totally understand why they did. Again, it's a very compelling case, right? I mean, it really is like you're in a movie and you're trying to track down this UFO whistleblower, like something right out of the X-Files.
Yeah. I'm surprised in a way that after all this time, the person hasn't said, hey, guess what? It was me. But I mean, a lot of they would really have to have a lot of information before they could just come forward. I would think they would have to say, where they were exactly and, all that, I would imagine. Well, I'm still surprised.
The person that was suspected was contacted to be part of the documentary. He chose not to, but after speaking with him, we are now just generally believe he had nothing to do with it. I mean, for various reasons. Yeah. Why he just didn't say that at the time. There's also some reasons about that in terms of maybe mental capacity. But I firmly believe that this person had nothing to do with it. And I was the one that for years was like, yeah, the same thing. Why doesn't this guy just say something, even as a hoax? I mean, it's not like he's going to be charged with anything. There was no crime committed. But even the people who I do believe were involved, they're still around and they're active on social media. And it's not a coincidence that they've moved into kind of the scarier forms of conspiracy, the sort of very right-wing QAnon stuff, which if you read the Guardian documents, it's like the precursor to that. I mean, it's they're spooky. I mean, they're racist. They promote a certain brand of white supremacy. Like it's you go into the conspiracy rabbit hole, and it starts with aliens and JFK assassination, and then it starts to get almost creepy. I mean, this is what I was saying about the X-Files. The X-Files conspiracies on that program, they're almost quaint by the conspiracies of today's standards. I mean, back then it was just the government covering up crashed UFOs. Now it's like, was 9/11 an inside job, and are people, are the government trying to kill us through vaccines or tracking us and stuff? It's I don't think there would be an X-Files show today because it wouldn't be entertaining. It would literally be too scary. I don't think anyone wants to watch that program. It's this is what I mean when I say that the conspiracy of the X-Files were almost quaint in their time. You go back at them and it was very clearly delineated lines between good and evil. And now it's like we've all become the most paranoid Mulder self, where who do you trust? No one. You can't trust anyone. You can't trust your government. You're not supposed to trust your doctor. It's just, it's a spooky place. So I'm not surprised that when we try to track down the people that we thought were responsible for the hoax, that they're still very active in the conspiracy world. And now they lean very, very hard towards the spooky, the spooky kind.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I'm off of social media for the most part. I do a little bit of Twitter, but yeah, I mean, the conspiracies are kind of hard to take after a while. So let's talk about what else has happened in that area. What makes, and would you say that area is still a hotspot, and where is it geographically exactly?
Yeah, it's in Eastern Ontario. It's about it's called West Carleton, and that's sort of the region that encompasses towns like Carp, which is where the UFO incident, the Guardian incident took place. Carleton Place, Almont, or some of these other small towns. It's a rural, like a farming community, but it's kind of actually exploded in the past 30 years. I remember when we went up to film the documentary. There's a lot of places where it's still the same 6 houses along the road. And then you go down a street and there's a housing development there where there used to be like a field. So it has exploded in a lot of ways, but in other ways it's still very rural. It's still very picturesque. It's a beautiful place. I have not heard of any recent sightings in that area. I think that flap of the late 90s or late 80s, early 90s was the last, at least to date. I have not heard of anything happening in that area, and I keep a toe in ufology. I'm not an investigator anymore, but I sort of keep up to date with what's going on, especially in Canada. And I haven't really heard anything in that area except for Guardian. You know, Guardian pops up every now and again when the Unsolved Mysteries clip starts to circulate, and people sort of say, "Hey, whatever happened with that case?" And I think that's probably why the people that made UFO Town, Nick Crow and Katie Lemaire, decided to do a documentary about it in the first place, because it is so interesting. And whatever happened with those people, whatever happened with that case, you know, it's still a mystery.
Right. Now, I know you do a lot of other things as well, and I believe I saw that you have that something's coming out on film or something that you have worked on.
Yeah, I'm a writer right now. I write fiction. I write mostly horror fiction, some detective fiction, and recently one of my stories, it's a sort of a haunted house story called The House on Ashley Avenue, is going to be adapted for film, for a Netflix film, actually. And it's being produced by Sam Raimi, and it's being directed by Corin Hardy, who directed a couple of horror movies called The Nun and The Hollow. So it's a really, really exciting time for me, because these are people that I've always wanted to work with. It's as I always say, it's like the film version of having Stephen King come up to you and saying, "Hey, you want to write a book together?" You know, like this is the movie equivalent of that. So
that's great.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And but getting back to like the UFO topic, there she can.
There he is again.
Great. Yeah. How often do you look into that? How much of your time is spent on that topic?
Well, I could say fiction-wise, I wrote a novel about it. It was it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek satire of ufology, not in a making fun of it kind of a way, but sort of a like a Dr. Strangelove kind of a way, sort of a look at governments and conspiracies and sort of how they run. It's also about family too, so it actually has a lot of heart to it. On the actual level of ufology, it's really just a matter of keeping up to date with the latest cases, such as they are. You know, I sort of I follow the blogs, I follow the major websites. I like reading Kevin Randall's stuff. He's got a great blog where he just dissects stuff. He seems pretty level-headed, and he just seems like a guy who's just like, he's not trying to make excuses about like the Roswell case, even though his opinions have changed on it over the years. I think it's the people that are sort of steadfastly sticking to their guns, and even in the light of things that come true or new information that comes to light, you don't want to believe them as much, because I think it's such a fluid subject matter that I think it only makes sense that people's opinions change, you know? So for me, it's just like, he seems like a really level-headed guy, you know, and Jacques Vallée, you know, like I I looked him up in the past few years, and I thought that he had passed away. I couldn't believe he's still with us. It's like, thank God. I was like, wow, he's still here. He's still fighting the good fight, which is great because, again, his book was A Passport to Magnolia. I'm butchering that. I read that like 20 years ago. But I mean, it's like it's the book on ufology, and for me, and the way that folklore has evolved over time. I think that book combined with like John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies are two of the best books on ufology, because they really explore the phenomenon just beyond the sense of our aliens, our extraterrestrials visiting us, and they get into folklore, other dimensions, just other explanations other than, the typical scientific one, which is usually discounted by scientists that basically say, aliens and physical crafts would not be able to reach us. It wouldn't try to reach us. It doesn't really make any sense with physics as we understand it. So I think it offers not even another explanation, but a very different understanding of the way that we approach that phenomenon. It's one of the reasons why I've always liked a book like The Mothman Prophecies, because it starts as a book about seemingly about a cryptid, the Mothman, but it encompasses virtually every single kind of paranormal phenomenon, from UFO sightings to premonitions to time travel. I mean, everything's in that book. It's just like, that's when you want to talk about a flap. I mean, something definitely seemed like it was happening in Point Pleasant during those 18 months that culminated with the collapse of the Silver Bridge, right? Those are the books that I like. That's the way that I like to really explore the phenomenon, is in a global way, where it's not just, here's a video, what could this thing be? It's like the recent Navy videos. Like, I watched the 60-minute segment and I thought it was interesting insofar as, the videos look cool. I don't know. I don't think that they're aliens, but maybe they are. But it's just, it's like in this day and age now, you see a video or a photo, which can be so easily faked. I need more than that to be convinced. I'm not going to look at those videotapes. I certainly didn't watch that 60-minute segment and go, oh, it must be aliens. It's just, I'm interested. I'm keeping an open mind, but you got to give me more than that. I think there's.
Well, I don't think the Navy's going to be putting out faked videos.
No. And I just think that maybe not faked, but maybe misidentified, I guess. Like they're definitely interesting, but what can really be extrapolated from them? Like it's like them, the pilots as witnesses are very compelling, because they seem like they are confused by what they're seeing. So that definitely goes a long way. But again, there's a certain segment of the public, especially the people, the public that's interested in UFOs, and they see a headline that says Navy admits to study on UFOs, and they hear Navy says UFOs are definitely aliens. And like, of course, that's not what they're saying, right? But that's what they hear. They hear UFO and they immediately think alien, when all they're saying is, we just saying it's unidentified. We don't know what it is. I think a number of them will point that out. That's they'll remind the listening audience or whatever that it's unidentified, and that's all it is at this point. Mm-hmm. So Jordan put in a question. I hear a lot is happening with your book, Every House is Haunted. What's going on with that? Yeah, well, that's the book that my short story, The House on Ashley Avenue, is in. So that's the one that's being turned into the
same one.
Yeah, that's the same one.
Excellent.
So, yeah. I'm actually working on that as a consultant too, which is always nice, because a lot of times they don't usually involve the author. So I guess they think that I can bring something to the project, because they didn't just say, we're just going to buy the rights and away we go.
Yeah. That, and then you don't have a handle on it at all. So interesting. I think what I'm going to do is, I usually do this at the last half hour. I might as well do it now and get the audience, if anyone wants to give you a ring. I'm going to put that phone number up, and that number is 855-472-5483. So anyone wants to call in, Bill will be standing by, and he is ready. So, so that's interesting. And there was a guy that I talked to in Connecticut. Oh, he wrote a book about the most haunted house in America. I'm sure it's in Connecticut. I don't know if you heard this story about it, but it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, no, I think I did hear about that. I mean, I love any haunted house story. I mean, that's why I wrote the one for the Netflix movie, trying to you're trying to really honor the tradition of the haunted house story while bringing something new to it, but bringing something new that is very organic, that doesn't feel like a gimmick. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is for me with everything that I write. There's when you're working, especially in genre fiction, it's not even hard to do something original. I mean, you sort of just know that if you're writing a ghost story or a monster story or a vampire story, there's been hundreds or thousands of them written over the years. So the thing that you bring that's unique to it is yourself. You know, you don't necessarily have to come up with a wacky twist to it. You just have to write it honestly the way that you would do it. And that was something that always really resonated with me, that the crime author Elmore Leonard said was he writes the book that he would want to read himself. Like this is his rules of writing. And it feels like a no-brainer, but I mean, a lot of writers really tear themselves up really trying to come up with something, or they can be really hard on themselves, and myself included. So I really try to adhere to his rules of writing because they're kind of simple, but they're simple in their brilliance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to put, we talked earlier, you mentioned Kevin Randall, who I have a great amount of respect for.
Mm-hmm.
And in the chat room, I'm going to put up his blog, because the reason I would like to, talk a little bit quickly about him and put his blog out there is that a lot of times when I'm trying to figure out if something's a really good case or not,
mm-hmm.
I go to Kevin's blog, and you can find 90% of the time you can find that case on his blog, and his very well thought out and researched, opinion about
mm-hmm.
it. So it's a great place for someone who's just getting into looking at this topic to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and he's very level-headed, and he has a lot of credentials, but he doesn't lead with them. He doesn't try to say, well, this is who I am, and this is my military career, so you should listen to me.
Dr. Randall. Yeah.
Like any intelligent person, he leads with his words. He leads with his mind, and that's why I've always enjoyed the blog. Like you said, like I go back to it, and I'll just search it. And like you said, that if there's a case you're interested in, whether it's like Kecksburg or Bob Lazar or anything in the UFO lore, he's usually got a blog on it somewhere, if not a few, and they're always very even keeled and level headed. Even when he's skeptical, like he's not mean about it. He's willing to be convinced, but he's not a fool. He's not going to be convinced by someone saying, oh, well, he's just real, and you're trying to debunk this, blah blah blah. Like it's usually the response to a lot of skeptics. I think there are people who are active debunkers, but that's the way that I approach my skepticism. I'm interested. I'm willing to be convinced, but I'm going to need more than a blurry video or an eyewitness account of someone who says, well, I know what I saw, and it was definitely not a conventional aircraft, and you can't convince me otherwise. It's like, well, that's okay. I'm not trying to, but if you're going to put that forth as evidence, I need more than that. This was going back to my investigator days. I always believed in listening more than talking as an investigator. Just sort of almost like an oral storyteller. You're collecting the stories of these witnesses, and I wouldn't really question them, because a lot of times there's no point. Like they weren't. This was in a time before people had cameras on their cell phones. They usually didn't really have any evidence. You had to have been carrying a camera or a video camera on your person at the time, and most people weren't when they had these encounters. So you're really just collecting eyewitness accounts, which you can't really do anything with. So it's you just have to be respectful and ask your questions and record it all, right? So and hope that maybe it accounts for something.
I remember talking to Bruce Maccabee years ago when I first. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, maybe 5-7 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and he said that he was thinking, even though he was the video and photo analyst for MUFON for a long time, or one of those agencies, he says the witnesses are more important than the image. And I think the two of them together,
mm-hmm.
Makes more sense. But I mean, if your witness is off, I understand what he's saying about that. If the witness is off or it doesn't hold up,
mm-hmm.
then there could be a question. We do have Russell on hold from Maryland. Well, welcome to the show, Russell.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the call. You have a question for our guest tonight?
Yeah, just we've been seeing that the Navy's admitted to. I mean, questioning beyond belief the incredible aerodynamic things that they're doing. Don't think that any other entity or country in the world that had that technology, they'd be number one, and we'd already be in the can as far as number one as a superpower. I mean, needless to say, if that's a technology they have, we're done. Why aren't they using it?
That's a good point. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to what I saw in the 60 Minutes episode where they obviously spoke to two of the pilots, and they showed some of the plane camera footage. And again, it's really hard to draw conclusions because, again, like they're Navy pilots. They are saying that they've never seen anything like this. There is some video footage to back it up. If the objects were able to, execute the, I think it was like a 60,000 foot plunge, without a sonic boom, and it wasn't just, a mistake in the monitoring equipment, like a miscalibrated radar or something. And there was a craft that actually did that without producing that sonic boom. And it was, then you could say that, yeah, that technology does seem way too far ahead, of what this would be on the Earth, whether it's Russia or China. So again, it's just, I think it's compelling, but for me, it's hard to really draw conclusions.
Yeah.
Can I say something more?
Yeah, go ahead.
If they've not used that, and of course you've seen the same videos I have, the latest one with the big pyramids, which obviously, if the perspective is correct, they're huge, and they're doing things that we have no technology to do so. I mean, if I was another foreign country and had the technology, I wouldn't be sitting back watching it, not using it. They'd be number one in the United States, and whomever is using it, Russia, China, whomever, maybe not even Russia or China, will go, I'm not going to ET. I've been watching it a long time, and I've been seeing some incredible things with people with cameras, and I agree with a lot of things you said too, but when I see technologies, it's outperforming, and I can't believe that people are analyzing them things as a plane in the background, and they like the GoPass video and things like that, in transmedian vehicles, going in and out of the water videos from really expensive systems. So just a thought, guys. So thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Just to close that up, I do think that the pyramid video, I think that is the weakest of them all, only because it could be a camera aperture. But the other videos I think are very compelling. But really, thank you for the call. I appreciate it, Russell.
Yeah, I mean, I think the videos are compelling too. I'm very curious to see where we go from there, right? Because I mean, if it is a technology and we're worried that this is something advanced from us, then we should be seeing you would think some blowback from that, like if it's someone that's using technology against us in some way, is it something that we have to actually be afraid of? I'm not, like, again, I think it's compelling, but I'm not really convinced yet. Like, it's going to take more than that for me to be convinced. It's just belief is a very strong thing. People tend to sort of believe what they want to believe, of course. And I just try to keep my mind as open as possible. So for me to go from zero to aliens, based on what we've seen, like, say, for example, in the 60 Minutes episode, whether it's because the Navy pilots have got a lot of credentials and they don't normally see this stuff, like I said, I'm very interested, and I believe that they had the encounter that they had. But for me to go from that to aliens, I'm not there yet. That's all I'm saying. And some people, don't even need much less than that to convince themselves of aliens, right?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to the realm of trying to explain something, I've been careful all along to not say, everything's aliens or extraterrestrial, but I think it's definitely in the running. And because when you can't explain what some of these technologies, as what you were just mentioning, lack of sonic boom for, breaking the speed of sound 10 times over, things like that, and stopping on a dime when, 1500 Gs or whatever appears to have. And then for the eyewitnesses of the pilots, those type of things, it's kind of, okay, let's look at the possibilities.
Sure.
What are the possibilities for that? I don't believe, I believe one of the sayings that I heard Lou Elizondo say is, maybe it's like 100 years or 1,000 years advanced. I mean, that's a big stretch between 100 and 1,000 years, the way technology grows. But he doesn't think that we have the technology. So, that's when it kind of, it seems like that might be true. If what they have seen on radar and what they've seen and witnessed and all that.
Yeah, the radar example is a good one when they talk about the I think it's 60,000 feet, 60 or 80,000 feet, the drop where it makes the extreme drop. I mean, that's where I would say if that was one that was only picked up by their equipment, what's more likely that it's an alien ship that's able to do this maneuver without creating a sonic boom, or is it something wrong with the monitoring equipment? I go towards that, then I go towards, well, it must be aliens. Like that's just me. Like again, like maybe it was aliens, but I'm going to need more than that to be convinced. It's
it was 80,000 feet, and it was also it wasn't just a single radar. There were other, there was more radar involved. So that, I think it's one of the most compelling cases. And so there are just some cases out there that just keep me looking into this topic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm so interested. I mean, as skeptical as I am, at the end of the day, I'm not dismissing it. Like I am interested. I am listening. Unfortunately, having a skeptical attitude is sort of seen as being very combative when it's really just, hey, man, I'd love for it to be aliens, but I'm not a fool, and I need more than just the mystery. I love the mystery. I write about the mystery. It's the reason why I got interested in this in the first place. And even though I'm no longer actively investigating, it's the reason why I keep a toe in the business. But I think if you ask even the most respected people, like your Jacques Vallée's and your Kevin Randall's, they would tell you the exact same thing. There are definitely cases that they find very compelling, but whether or not they actually think extraterrestrial biological entities are visiting Earth today, I don't know if either one of them or anyone who is, very skeptically minded would say, oh yeah, definitely. I think they might point to certain cases and say, well, this one's very compelling or that one's very compelling, as I would, but it's just so hard because, I mean, even when you look at a case like Roswell, which is sort of held up as the UFO retrieval case, very little evidence to support it. Even Randall to this day doesn't think that it was extraterrestrial. I mean, this was a case that for 20 years no one was speaking about until Berlitz and
1980
Freeman wrote the book. Back in the 70s. There was a whole span of years when no one was talking about this. After 47. So it definitely, again, it seemed like something had happened there. But there was never any physical evidence. It was really just stories that people had told that had been passed down, almost like a folklore. Again, I'm very interested in it as a kind of folklore. But in terms of the nuts and bolts evidence, there wasn't really much of anything that said, oh yeah, definitely that was aliens, that was a UFO that crashed there. But again, it's a mystery. I find it very interesting. Like a lot of people, I wasn't convinced of the. I think it was the 97, the balloon theory, the top secret balloon.
Oh yeah, in the 90s, right? Yeah.
When they sort of disclosed that wasn't entirely convincing either. But again, just because it's not convincing doesn't mean that I immediately go to aliens. So there's lots of reasons why the government is not forthcoming with information, and to assume that the solution or the reason is extraterrestrial. There's a lot less that governments have covered up for. There are a lot like smaller reasons than aliens, a lot smaller mistakes that they've still felt the need to keep from the public. It's almost a knee-jerk reaction with some agencies. They're just it's become standard policy just to sort of obfuscate and lie.
Well, I think if the government doesn't know, like to say the Air Force or whatever has no idea what's going on, it's just as dangerous as if they did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have no way to protect the skies or have answers about what's going on.
Absolutely. And they don't want it. I mean, the nation's security is only based on how much faith you have in it, that the people have in it.
That's right.
And yeah, you don't want to start. Frankly, I think there'd be more mass hysteria from a government saying we don't know how to protect our people than you would have with the government saying aliens exist and we've been in contact with them for 60 years. I mean, we've seen enough movies and TV shows of this idea that, it's going to rock people, it's going to destroy religion. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't either.
We've been pretty prepared from UFO media for the past 50 years, good and bad.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think you're right about that. I don't think it would. I think a lot of people are sort of prepared for it, or have slowly been preparing. I mean, if that's the case, and the argument you mentioned earlier that I've heard a lot of times about, how would they get here from there from here? That's one you do hear a lot, and maybe it's just something that we'll figure out someday if it is that we're being visited. Because we're just floating around, in space.
They would have to be moving through dimensions if they were coming here in kind of a physical way. I like to think that if I was going to write a realistic story about actual contact that the government had been covering up, it wouldn't have been a UFO crash. It wouldn't have been aliens on ice in a bunker somewhere. It would be a signal. It would be radio. I think it would be the reason why that doesn't hold up in terms of reality, that we've been in radio contact with aliens, is the fact that there are so many facilities that would have been able to intercept a broadcast like that, that the idea that only, like, say, the US government or the CIA or the NSA, it just doesn't hold any water. Like, there's no way of screening that kind of a call that would be being broadcast to Earth and be able to have been aimed directly at Earth. I mean, it's sort of an infinitesimal. You start getting into the math there, where again, all you need to talk to is a scientist, not even an astronomer, but just a mathematician who will tell you the mathematical possibility of this or this happening. It's like what you're talking about with the Navy footage about how the technology seems to be either 100 or 1,000 years advanced. Even 1,000 years advanced, say it's an alien technology that's 1,000 years. The idea that there's an alien species that's like around 1,000 years advanced from us is still very astronomical. Like, I think it's more likely that they'd be millions of years advanced to us. In which case we would never see them. It wouldn't be, here's an unexplained sighting, or here's a craft that's not able to create a sonic boom. No way. They would be stealth all the way. We wouldn't even know they're watching us, so. Yeah,
there's a lot of questions about that. Like, I remember, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, someone wrote during the chat, if they did want to be seen, why do they have lights? Why would they need lights?
That was the big thing with the Guardian case was the Guardian included documents on why the flares were there, was because they were to help the UFO land, which of course makes no sense, that you have this craft that flies millions of light years, but needs flares to land its craft. Or again, you go back to Roswell or any UFO crash retrieval story. They make great stories. I love the story about Shag Harper. It's a Canadian UFO crash.
I was going to ask you about that.
It's great, but again, they make good stories, but there's not really any evidence to back them up, even Roswell, because I'll give the aliens credit. They are always very considerate that they crash their ships into very remote areas like deserts and the deep ocean, rather than crashing them into any populated areas, because it never happens. There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of reports of crash retrievals over the years from all over the world, and they're never in a place where there could have been anyone to see it or recover material from it. It's always very conveniently in a place where the government's able to come in, scoop everything up, sanitize the area. They don't leave anything behind. And for me, that's what I would like as evidence. I would like someone to go back to Roswell, and if they found a piece of debris or some alien DNA and they take that to 60 Minutes, I'd be much more convinced by that than the Navy stuff, which again, I find very, very interesting, and I want to know more, and I'm keep a very open mind, but I'm still not convinced yet that it's aliens visiting the Earth, as much as I wish that was true.
The Earth is 70% ocean, and we were just talking about the crash. When we have like debris coming in from space, landing, it usually lands in the ocean because it's 70% of the Earth. So that is, I wonder if, has anybody ever talked about a crash in the ocean or recovery? I know there was that one off of Malibu, I think, where it's just a rock formation. I believe that it is. But
say you were aliens visiting the Earth. I mean, say you were here and your technology was so advanced, but somehow you really were worried about detection, which again doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. When you see these craft and they're able to do these maneuvers, I always think, wow, they're so advanced. Why are we seeing them at all? It makes no sense to me. If they don't want to be seen, they shouldn't be able to be seen. Bending light, electromagnetic fields, there will be ways to render themselves invisible to even the human eye, much less all of our surveillance equipment. But yeah, you're right. The Earth is 70-80% water. Why are they not just hanging out there? James, The Abyss is one of my favorite movies.
That is another theory. Yeah.
It's and that's what the aliens do in the abyss. They don't want to be detected by humans, so they go to the one place that humans can't go, an ocean trench 8 miles, below sea level, where the pressure is too great. Humans they can't even go. Their technology can barely even reach it. That to me makes sense. It's not just a good story, but from the alien angle, where they don't want to be detected, and there are physical, biological entities with physical crafts. That's what you would do if you did not want to be noticed by the local population.
Now we only have about 4 minutes left, so this question is a shortish answer. But what would you say is what would you consider the most compelling UFO case? And it doesn't have to be Canada.
Yeah, well, one of them is Canada, and again, I'm going to go back to Mothman just because I feel like I don't know if it was UFOs, but something paranormal was. I feel like something paranormal was definitely happening there, just because it was such a melange of UFOs, cryptids, premonitions, men in black. I can't believe that something wasn't going on there. Whether or not it was connected to the bridge or not, I think the collapse of the bridge was pretty much explained. It wasn't really supernatural, and I think they kind of said it was coming. It was a load bearing issue, but I've always felt like, I would have liked to have gone back in time and investigated one case. It would have been Mothman. I think maybe something was really happening there, but again, it's hard to tell, right? So much time has passed. In terms of specifically UFO cases, I think Falcon Lake in Canada.
Oh yeah.
You had a witness who seemed really legit. And again, people do lie. They don't need a reason to lie. So I'm always very wary of, this person tells the truth and they're honest as the day is long. They have no reason to lie. That's not usually convincing to me. People don't need a reason to lie. But I will say that he seemed really, really honest. I didn't really think there was a reason why he would tell the story. There was trace evidence. There was physical effects on his body.
Right.
There was material collected at the site. It just seemed like it really fulfilled a lot of those categories that even like an investigator like J. Allen Hynek would be able to say, yeah, something happened here. We don't know what it is. It was an experimental aircraft or something, but something physically tangible actually happened there. And that's why I like it. It's just whether or not it was aliens or not, at least it's a case that you can really sink your teeth into as an investigator. Like something really did seem to, there he is. Something really did seem to happen to him, and something seemed to happen to him in that area. You sort of treat it like my father was in the RCMP. So I come from an investigator's background. So I really think of, you treat it like a crime scene. You treat it like a criminal case. These are the things you need to line up. Like eyewitness accounts are important, but if you take that to like a trial, you're probably going to need more than that to get a conviction. So you need other evidence. You need physical evidence. You need, forensics, that sort of a thing. And if you were going to apply that to this UFO investigation, I think Falcon Lake just really checks off a lot of those boxes. I still don't know what it is, but for me, it's just, again, it's another one of these ones where it just seems like such a genuine dyed-in-the-wool mystery.
Right. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I wish you could have had you on for a whole show. Maybe you'll come back someday. Whoops. Did I kick you out? So here you are. I don't know what happened. The technology. Anyway, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Yeah.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. Next week, we'll be back from, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be here Tuesday next week. I'm going to do my best. But it should be, if so, it'll be here with Ron James. So thanks so much, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.